Hi students, I'm going to walk you through how to do your lesson plan assignment. So if you take a look here, it's under assignment number 4, written lesson plan. There's a lot of information here that's there to guide you and give you additional support. But probably one of the first things that you should do is decide whether or not you want to write a lesson plan that's designed for preschool or for K through 3. So up here, you'll see that there's a creative curriculum program, which is a guide that gives you lots of great information for what kind of elements you need to think about when writing a lesson plan. So that's there more for your resource support. If you are going to do a preschool lesson plan, I'm going to direct your attention here to number 1. Here's a helpful video, 5 tips for making a great preschool lesson plan. And then if you go down a little bit more to number 2, you have a sample preschool lesson plan and then the blank preschool lesson plan template if you choose to do preschool. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what this lesson plan looks like, and I'm going to walk you through the elements. So if you choose preschool, go ahead and open it up. Okay, so both of these are worth 40 points, whether you do preschool or K through 3. So this is one that I created myself. You'll see each section gives you the number of points designated for that section, so it's really clear to see how you will be assessed. And each section is pretty self-explanatory, but hopefully it'll make even more sense with my verbal instructions. So this section up here, straightforward, your name, curriculum area. So this is where you're going to put your content, whether it's language and literacy, math, science, social studies, art, physical education, etc. Activity name, that's up to you. You get to be creative. And the age group of the children. So we're looking at anywhere from 18 months up through age 4, I would say, because once you go to age 5, then you would probably want to use the other lesson plan template for K through 3. So you get 2 points just for putting in that information. So there you go, 2 easy points. Overarching goal, this is important. So in italics here, you'll see that it gives you instructions on exactly what should go in that section. So this is asking, how do you see this lesson fitting into the big picture of the student's long-term learning? So in other words, you don't want to create lessons that are kind of isolated and don't connect to bigger concepts. So I know sometimes we fall into those traps. We see something amazing on Pinterest, or we have a great idea, but we need to make sure that it connects to a bigger idea. So in this situation, this particular lesson plan, we will help students to learn the specific names of healthy fruits and vegetables. So my big idea is, by exposing students to a variety of healthy foods through pictures, names of foods, and hands-on interactions with the foods that they can explore through the senses, students may be more likely to try new foods and make healthy choices. Also, after exposure through the book, Eating the Alphabet, and hands-on experiences, students will recognize the foods when they encounter them in the future. Therefore, students are developing language and literacy skills as well as bolstering their foundation for healthy eating. So I'm giving you a pretty comprehensive way that this lesson plan is connecting the children's learning to other bigger ideas. You need to look on this link to determine what the standard is. If you're doing preschool, you'll use the preschool foundations. If you're doing K through 3, you'll be using the Common Core California content standards. So use the link if you're not sure. Make sure that there is a standard there, though, because the standard is where you are showing accountability in terms of what it is that the child is expected to know and do by the end of the lesson. So the behavioral objective, also a very important part of the lesson. These are both the roadmap. So the standards, your behavioral and instructional objectives, these are your blueprint and roadmaps to basically establish what is it that you're expecting the child to know and be able to do. How are they going to demonstrate that they are meeting this objective, right? After all, that's kind of our purpose of teaching a lesson, is we want the children to walk away with new knowledge or skills. So for this section, it's worth 4 points. By the end of the lesson, what concept, information, skill, or strategy will the students learn? And 2, how will they demonstrate that knowledge? So, for example, I have number 1, the students will be able to accurately identify through verbal labeling at least 4 foods represented in the book, Eating the Alphabet. So notice that I'm selecting verbs here, and these are called levels of cognition if you want to get fancy. These are verbs that tell me what the student is supposed to be able to do at the end of the lesson. So identify. You want to be careful and stay away from vague words like the student will learn or the student will know, because those are vague terms that we don't know how to measure. They're not measurable. So make sure that you avoid vague terms like the student will know, the student will learn, the student will understand. You need to be specific. So in this case, identify. We know that we can observe someone identifying, and then I'm telling you exactly how they're going to identify through verbal labeling at least 4 foods. So I'm even giving you a quantity. The second one, the students will be able to use precise language. So again, very specific. We can observe a child using precise language to describe 1 to 2 attributes of at least 4 foods. So again, that's measurable. We can count that they are able to describe 1 to 2 attributes of at least 4 foods represented in the book. All right, now we're going to move on to the assessment part. So this is how you're going to determine at the end of the lesson how we know whether or not the student met the objective. So what specific tangible evidence will show that each student has met 2 types of objectives? After the lesson, children will be shown various foods that were listed in the book. Students will name at least 4 foods with accuracy. So again, this is very specific. This can be done through student initiation, i.e. the teacher asks, what is the name of this fruit or vegetable, while pointing to the picture of that particular fruit or vegetable, or with child demonstrating receptive language understanding. For example, the teacher might say, we are looking for the apricot on this page. Can you point to the apricot? Then students will be asked to describe the food using 1 to 2 adjectives. For example, the apricot is round. So notice that I gave another variation because we're looking at exceptional children, and so they might not all be able to demonstrate the skill the way that some other children will. So you need to make sure that you're thinking about various ways to allow the student to meet those objectives. But that actually will come into even more play down here in this section, in the accommodation section. What type of accommodation did you use to ensure whole class participation for your lesson? Be specific and address at least 2 exceptionalities. So we've learned about a lot of different exceptionalities in class. So what I'd like you to do is to pick 2 different exceptionalities and just give me some ideas on how you might address those exceptionalities for this particular lesson. So for example, if there is a child with a visual impairment, the teacher will bring in real or toy vegetables to represent as many of the items in the text as possible. Students can hold, smell, taste the objects when applicable. The teacher can use sandpaper letters that spell out the names of objects, etc. For students who have hearing impairment, signing can be used to name the fruits and vegetables, as well as allowing students to point to the correct fruit or vegetable when prompted, rather than naming it if the student has challenges with verbal expression. So again, you can choose any 2 exceptionalities and give at least 1 concrete way that you would be able to help a child with that exceptionality access and be successful with the lesson. Materials is pretty straightforward. It says list all of them, including book titles. You can include links, handouts. Sometimes students will include handouts that they would use in the lesson. All right, now we're getting into the meat of the lesson. So everything that we've done up until this point is kind of the roadmap, the foundation, the plan, the objectives, etc. So here is where you're actually going to take us through the steps of the lesson. So the introduction is worth 2 points. How are you engaging the students into your lesson? What is your opening to the lesson? So this is where you have an opportunity to really get the students' attention and to hook them. We often call this the hook or the anticipatory set. So be creative, think outside of the box and think about what you might do to grab the students' attention, and obviously think about what's appropriate for the age. So in this case, because we're talking about fruits, I came up with the idea that the teacher will come to class dressed as a farmer or dressed with an apron and chef's hat and will say, "Hello, students. Can anyone guess who I am dressed as?" What is the job of someone who is dressed this way? That's right. The job of a farmer or chef is to make sure that healthy and delicious foods are prepared for us to eat. This not only makes our tummies happy, but it makes our bodies healthy. So you are, in this section, you're literally kind of writing a script of what you would say. What I always say, a rule of thumb for writing lesson plans, is to use the substitute test. So in other words, imagine that you had to call out sick that day and your lesson plan is given to a substitute teacher for that day. Is your lesson plan detailed enough that the substitute would be able to carry out your lesson plan exactly as you envision, where all of the students would be able to fulfill the requirements of the lesson? The substitute wouldn't have any questions about what it is that they're supposed to do. So make sure that you are specific. If you're saying something like teacher will read a book, well, what book? How will the teacher read? Will the teacher read it verbally? Will the teacher sit, have the children sitting on the floor, and then the teacher will read a page at a time and then show pictures or ask questions? So something as simple as teacher will read a book, a substitute may not know how that's going to look. So the more specific you are, the better. Always think, if a substitute were teaching this lesson, would they have enough detail to carry it out appropriately? All right, so the next part is worth quite a bit of points, the procedure, because this is where you're going step by step. So it says detailed as possible. Where are the children sitting? What the teacher and TAs are doing, and how the lesson plan is delivered to the student. So I have here, students are sitting in a circle at the rug, teacher sitting on the teacher's reading chair, and then I go step by step and tell you exactly what the teacher is doing. Okay. So make sure that you are as detailed as possible in the procedure section. Again, think about that substitute test. All right, now the closing. The closing is important as well. How will you bring closure to the lesson, and by doing so, review and determine what students have learned? So we don't just say, okay, guys, thank you for participating. We need to bring back the learning aspect. What is the goal, and how do we review the material that the students were covered during that particular lesson? So here's one way you might approach it. Students, you all did a great job learning about these new foods and using words to describe the foods. Now, when you go to the grocery store, you can pick out some of these fruits and vegetables and make a farmer happy. So I'm connecting it back to the learning where students are describing foods, and it's connecting back to healthy choices. Transition activity, list the activity and what you will tell students to do to transition them into your next activity. So part of the lesson is, how do you, after you wrap up, how do you get them to move to the next activity, whatever that might be? So here is an example of what they might do here. Students will be asked to place the real plastic plush foods into a basket. The song Jump in the Line will be played as the students go two at a time from their desks to the basket, around the room, once in a conga line, then back to their seats. And I have a video there on YouTube for Jump in the Line. Love that, from Beetlejuice. Love that. Harry Belafonte. And then I say table monitors will collect the handouts, etc. Teacher language interactions worth 3 points. What are some open-ended statements, divergent questions you might ask? So this means no, yes, or no question. So for example, do you like apples? That is not an open-ended divergent question, because students will either say yes or no. Or have you ever eaten a banana? Again, not an open-ended question. So make sure that your questions are not yes or no questions, but they are divergent, meaning that there can be lots of different answers. So things like why, how, and then vocabulary words. Make sure that you include, I would say try to aim for at least 5 vocabulary words. It says list new and or unique words that you will introduce to the children that relate to this activity. Include a written child definition for each word. So in other words, write your definition in child-friendly language. Remember, when presenting your activity, you must introduce and discuss the words with children in a developmentally appropriate manner. So make sure that you include the definition, not just the word, but include the definition in child-friendly language. And that is eating the alphabet. So this is a sample lesson plan for preschool. Thanks so much.